Negotiations for a ceasefire in Gaza have paused and will resume next week. The Hamas delegation has left Cairo, but reassured that talks will continue until an agreement is obtained. And mediators have been locked in discussions for almost a week to secure a deal before the Muslim holy month of Ramadan begins in just a few days. Hamas officials are claiming that Israel has rejected the group's demands, which includes ending its offensive and withdrawal of troops in Gaza. Hamas has also asked for Israel to ensure the freedom of entry for aid and the return of displaced Palestinians back to their homes. Israel has declined to send a delegation to the talks in Egypt. Israel's closest ally, the United States, remains optimistic on the outcome of negotiations. U.S. President Joe Biden has urged Hamas to accept a ceasefire plan that includes the release of Israeli hostages. The United Nations has repeatedly warned that further delays to enforce a temporary pause in fighting is putting tens of thousands of Palestinians on the verge of starvation. The enclave's health ministry says the total death toll in Gaza has surpassed 30,000 since the war began last October. Meanwhile, South Africa has asked the International Court of Justice to impose additional emergency measures on Israel in response to the widespread starvation in Gaza. Pretoria says the situation is a direct result of Israel's actions and is in violation of the Genocide Convention and the court's orders. The ICJ had ordered Israel to allow aid into the enclave to ease the humanitarian crisis. The court's rulings are legally binding, but it has little means to enforce them. Let's go to Alex Cadier. He's joining us live from Jerusalem. Alex, can we expect any significant breakthroughs at next week's scheduled ceasefire talks?
Well, certainly that is the hope. That is what the international community is pushing for, and that is the hope from those mediators from Egypt, Qatar, and the United States. But the more pressing deadline, the more pressing issue are the negotiations for this 6-week ceasefire that are been taking place in Cairo and that have ended for now. And that deadline of March 10th really looming. We know that that is the day at which the Israeli forces say if a deal isn't reached to release those hostages being held in Gaza, that they will start their military operation in Rafah, which could further escalate this already a very dangerous conflict. And that is the urgency, that is the pressure on both sides to reach this deal. We heard President Biden urging Hamas to accept the deal that Israel had put on the table, and Hamas saying that it had showed enough flexibility in these negotiations. So far, no breakthrough. The officials in those negotiations saying the talks are all but stalled. But the reality on the ground, both the dire, catastrophic humanitarian situation for people in Gaza and the horrors that those Israeli hostages are being subjected to, being held by Hamas, that is the backdrop of these negotiations. That is what's at stake. So there's a lot of pressure on those sides to reach a deal.
Should the deal not be made and should the ceasefire talks fail, what are the chances that Israel will go ahead to launch that ground offensive in Rafah?
Well, they said very clearly that they would launch it and that the March 10th deadline was there to allow for a deal to be reached. But if it isn't, they will launch an operation in Rafah to finish Hamas, in the words of the Israeli government spokesperson. And that has been rejected by the United States, by the United Kingdom. Both of those very close allies of Israel reject any operation in Rafah, and has further strained U.S.-Israeli relations. We saw the cabinet minister Benny Gantz, a political rival of Benjamin Netanyahu, brought in to the National Unity Government, having meetings with Vice President Kamala Harris in Washington and with the British Foreign Secretary David Cameron in London, facing very harsh criticism from Israel's allies when it comes to that operation in Rafah. We know that the Biden administration is considering ordering Israel not to use any U.S. weapons in that operation in Rafah. So certainly, should that go ahead, should these ceasefire talks fail, it will certainly further strain that U.S.-Israel relationship.
Reporting live from Jerusalem, Alex Cadier. Thank you.